seeing on the screen now Mr. Hugh Dellar. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Hello. Yes, we can hear you very well.
Brilliant.
Meet the co-founder. Thank you. Meet the co-founder of the online school and training company, www.lexicallab.com, a prolific author in English language education with a remarkable contribution. He co-authored 2 renowned 5-level general English series, Outcomes and Innovations, both published by National Geographic Learning. His expertise extends to methodology, as evident in his book, Teaching Lexically, released in 2016. Notably, he has recently collaborated on Grammar Nonsense and What to Do About It, a publication by Ways Goose Press. A lovely session about better online outcomes with Mr. Hugh Dellar. Good luck. May your hard work and dedication bring you the success you deserve.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Can you see the screen okay? I'm not sure if it's working okay, your end.
Excellent, excellent. We can see your screen in an excellent way. I love your colors.
To make it bigger or?
Better online outcomes, Hugh Dellar bringing the word to the classroom and classroom to life. National Geographic.
I'm not sure what I've done there. I've managed to put myself into the picture somehow. Let me just change that 1 second. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay. I'm with you until everything is going fine.
Okay, give me a second. I'm not sure what I've done. I've managed to remove myself. 1 second, 1 second. So let's try again. Sorry. So let me just try again. That was clearly a bit of a disaster. I'm not used to using Teams, so there's a kind of irony to the fact that I'm talking about online teaching, whilst also being fairly useless at using online technology. There you go. I hope that maybe makes some of you feel better about your own limitations with online tech and online teaching. Give me a second just for that to upload and then we'll get started.
Okay.
How's that? Can you see that okay or not?
Actually, it's downloaded.
Yeah, can you see it okay?
No, not yet, but it's on the road.
I can see. Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. I can see all the thumbs up coming in, so hopefully that's good. And do I need to make it bigger? Do I need to make it whole screen or anything or not?
Maybe whole screen is better.
Yeah,
so
how do I do that? Do you know? This is where my knowledge of Teams is a handicap. Do you know how I do that? Grid
okay,
view.
I think maybe grid view down.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, yes, no. I think it's this one.
No, let's see what else comes up. More actions. Grid view. That doesn't look right. No. Sorry, everyone.
Well, actually, it's okay. Well, actually, also, if it is not a full screen, also, it's very clear.
Yeah, should we just work with this? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah, okay, let's just go with it as it is. So, thank you for the introduction and apologies for me faffing around with Teams. As you can see, I'm not someone who usually uses Teams. In a way, I guess, possibly like many of you, I don't know. I have a sort of love-hate relationship with technology as a teacher. I didn't become a teacher in order to spend more time sitting in front of computers. I became a teacher to be with people. And before 2020, I guess, probably like a lot of you, I mostly taught face-to-face. This doesn't mean I was technophobic. I used emails. I blogged, I wrote books using Google Docs, I sometimes even did little vlogs, like video blogs. I used things like Vocaroo and Quizlet. And, you know, I kind of dipped my toes into what was out there and used bits and pieces that worked for me. I was also, though, a kind of engaged skeptic, I think. And I was always very wary of EdTech evangelists and wary of people trying to sell me things in lots of ways. Some of you may know Sugata Mitra, who came up with this whole idea of self-organizing learning environments, souls, and putting computers in the wall and kind of claiming that therefore kids in deprived areas could organize their own learning. I went on at IATEFL once in the UK straight after Sugata and was fairly shocked and appalled by some of his claims and much more skeptical than a lot of people in the audience were. And I guess for me, I've always believed that what makes learning truly interactive, what makes learning most meaningful, and what makes learning most motivating for students isn't actually to do with the technology. It's basically to do with us, the teachers, and that in the end, it's teachers that motivate and create meaning in the classroom and encourage interaction and engagement. And I think this is something we should all remember when we think about teaching with technology and teaching online. When COVID struck, probably, again, like a lot of you, I sort of realized that my income was under threat and I was thrown into the deep end and basically forced to start teaching online. And as a result of kind of having my hand forced, along with my writing partner, Andrew Walkley, I set up a small online school. And I think initially I was quite overwhelmed by the overload of availability, these endless platforms that were available. You know, do you use Zoom or do you use Teams, or is there something else? All of the posts about teaching online, all of the tools and tricks and tips, and it just felt very, very overwhelming. Personally, I went for a quick fix. I went for Zoom and using Word docs to record new language. And a few years down the line, I'm still running a kind of online school, and little has really changed for me. I'm a kind of resolutely low-tech online teacher, despite the fact I'm running my own little bespoke online school. And I think it's important to recognize that when you are predominantly working online, some things will never be the same. Okay, sitting down all day, looking at kind of two-dimensional people, it does mean you lose the kind of physicality of the classroom. And I do miss the proximity and being able to walk around a classroom and listen to one group with one ear, but also hear what's going on in the other corner while another group are talking. You can't do that if you're putting people in breakout rooms. I missed the coffee breaks. I missed the ability to kind of read the mood in the room, which is much easier in a physical classroom than online. At the same time, I think there also seems to be little point in trying to continue doing things online that work well in a physical classroom, but that work less well in a kind of online environment. So I think things like, you know, doing reading in class works fine if you're in a physical classroom, doesn't make much sense in an online classroom. Working through grammar or vocab exercises where students have their heads down for 10 minutes, again, works well in a physical classroom, less well in an online environment. Drilling, great if you're doing one-to-one online, but if you're trying to drill 15 people, it's much, much easier in a physical classroom than it is online, where you get people speaking at different times, echoes coming in, people's microphones feeding back, and so on. At the same time, obviously, and I'm sure for many of you this is also true, working from home is great. You know, the commute isn't as nightmarish as my old commute used to be. I get to work with people from all over the world, many of them also studying from the comfort of their own home. And even online classrooms, maybe even more true with online classrooms actually, they still provide a social space for us. And I think it makes sense to exploit the social space nature of the classroom. What works best, I think, in online classrooms is what always works best in any classroom. It's talking, it's sharing experiences and ideas and thoughts and feelings and opinions. It's stories, it's pair work, it's group work, and it's digging into and exploring the language that helps people to do all of these things better. So I guess in terms of what I've learned as an online teacher, what I would say is I've learned that it's important to keep things simple. It's important to keep things fresh. And above all, it's important to keep things human. I think we should all be wary of trying to reinvent the wheel. And I think we should all recognize that there's a whole edtech industry out there designed to encourage FOMO in us, this fear of missing out. And I think it's fine not to use much technology when you're teaching online. Increased use of tech tools doesn't make you a better teacher. It just makes you a teacher who uses more tech tools. If you are using a course book while you're working online, I think it's a good idea to flip as much of it as possible, get students to do some bits of it at home, and save the classroom time for what's most important: the talking, the communication, the discussion, the exploration of the language. At the same time, I think where technology does become really useful is in terms of what you can do and what you can get your students to do before class and after class to maybe help them get the most from the experience of being in the actual classroom. So what I'm going to do next is just really share some ideas on things you can get students to do before class and things you can get students to do after class that kind of feed into and feed out of the classroom situation. Okay, so let's have a look at some things. I'm hoping this works. I've made a little video for you here just to show I'm not a complete technological idiot. Let me just check my sound is being shared. Sorry, there's people that keep popping up saying they want to be admitted to the room. Let me just let them in. Yeah. So with the series of course books that I've written that I use called Outcomes, we have a kind of online vocabulary builder. Okay, sorry, there's people keep appearing, which is, yeah, okay. Can you still see that, by the way? Everyone still see that? Yeah,
Yes.
I'm guessing so. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. So I'm going to show you this quick video that I've made about what you can do. I mean, again, you don't necessarily have to be using this particular series. You can do this with any material you're going to be using where you have access to the kind of vocabulary that's going to be coming up in the next lesson. So let me just share this with you and show you how it works. So this is something that we've kind of designed as part of the coursebook series I've written, but a lot of other coursebook series that you may be using may have similar resources online, or you might sometimes be able to just make your own word lists or definition lists of things that you know are going to be coming up in future classes. And once you do, it's quite a useful tool, because what you can do is, as a homework before the class, you can just tell students to read ahead. You can tell them, in the next lesson, we're going to look at these 2 pages, read through the vocab, check anything you're not sure of. Okay? You could get students to write or even to record on their phones little example sentences of how they think they might use some of the vocabulary to talk about their own lives, their own worlds, their own experiences. So you're encouraging students to already think about personalizing language that they're going to meet in the next class. If you want to make it a little bit easier for the students, you could just tell them to read through, pick 5 words that you think you might want to use that might be useful for you. Students can also just be encouraged to test themselves. And as a teacher, you might want to model how you do this for them. So you might just tell them, I want you to record some example sentences of 5, 10 bits of new language from the things we're going to be looking at next class. All you then do is gap the key words, okay? So maybe the word is dominated and they write a sentence. Maybe they even just take it from a dictionary. It says something like, the economy dominated the election campaign. What they actually record on their phone is the economy, the election campaign. And say they record 10 of these sentences, they can go back, they can listen to this themselves, and they can think the economy, the election, dominated. Okay. If you want to make it easier, you can say the economy, the election campaign. If you want to make it harder, you include the keyword and you change something else. So you might change, for example, the economy dominated the election. And that way you're testing the language around the language that you're looking at. And once you've shown students how to do this, this is something that they can just be encouraged to do every week themselves before class. You can also get students to have a look at some speaking you're going to be asking them to do in the next class, okay? So if you're working from a course book, you might have some kind of speaking task or some kind of role play that you're going to be asking them to do in the classroom. You can show it to them in advance. So, for example, this is from an upper intermediate book I wrote. And the final conversation practice that you're kind of building towards in the lesson is getting students to work in pairs. Imagine you're driving a friend around your hometown or a city you're in now or a city you know well. Write down the names of 4 or 5 places that you're going to pass through. Think about what you want to tell your partner about these places and whether you'd recommend visiting them. Okay? So students can see this and be prepared for this in advance of the class. What you then do is, before the class, you tell them, have a look at the speaking section you're going to be doing. And what I'd like you to do is to record in your own first language, okay, whatever that first language may be, what you would tell students. So, you know, imagine you're driving along, you're looking out of the window and you're saying, over here, this is Finsbury Park. It's my big local park here in North London. There's been a park there for about 200 years and it's lovely to go there in the summer, and sometimes in the winter I do jog round the outside, but it's probably best to avoid it after dark because it can get a bit dodgy sometimes. And you'd record this in your own first language. What you could then do is listen back and think, yeah, I'm not sure how I would say that part there in English. Let me check in a bilingual dictionary from my first language into English. Students can then be encouraged to make a few notes about things they might want to say. And they could even then record themselves again in English, saying what they think they're going to say. And I think there's a real power to recorded rehearsals, because often what happens is you start recording it and then you make a mistake, or the telephone rings, or, you know, your kids start shouting from the room next door and you have to stop, and then you start again. And as you start again, you go through the bit you've done already and add to it. And then maybe you have to stop again because there's someone at the door and you have to go and answer the door, or there's some noise next door, so you stop and you start again. And each time you're doing this, you're kind of going over everything you've done already and adding to it. And I think that level of repetition really helps performance when you're actually in the classroom. If students are doing these recordings, obviously you could encourage them to send them to you. You could comment on them if you want. You could just record a few responses and send your responses back. Or if you are a bit pushed for time, you could just do nothing with them. You could just rest assured that students have done them themselves, and you could think, well, this is still good practice for them. This will still help them. Other things you could get students to do with whatever material you're using before you go into class is just get them to read through the audio scripts. And again, audio scripts for listenings that you might be doing in the classroom are often available online, or you can get PDFs of them. You know, they might be available in the course book that you're using if students have got access to that. And you can just get students to look at the audio script. So this is actually the audio script for the listening that students hear in class, which involves two people driving around a city being shown places. So you've got things like, you know, what a lovely day. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's been a really warm autumn. So where are we? Well, the bit we've just been through with all the high-rise blocks is what we call New Belgrade. It's the big up-and-coming area. All the new businesses are relocating here. So it's a kind of model of the conversation that you want students to actually have in the classroom. Again, what they can do is they can just read it without listening. They could read it aloud. If they're kind of dramatic students who like doing a bit of acting, they could do different voices for the A and B. They could read it through and they could see if any of the new words that they find are the same as the new words that they learned from the vocabulary list that you provided them with. They could also do things like, again, make little tests. They could record themselves reading it out and they could play the recording back, but they stop it at different points and see if they can remember the next line, or see if they can remember the next chunk of language or the next word. Or they could make this test more explicit. They could record themselves reading it out, but they gap one word in each line with a kind of or and then as they're recording it, they play it back and they listen and they see if they can remember the words, and then they can go back and read the tape script and they can check. So all of these are ways of encouraging the students to actually spend time engaging with the language before they come into the classroom. Okay? This also connects to things you might want the students to do after class. Give me a minute just to drink a little bit of tea. Sorry, I realise I'm living up to the stereotype of a typical English person here and interrupting a conference talk with a quick bit of tea. My apologies.
Have a nice tea.
Thank you. It keeps me going. It keeps me going. So other things you could do is after class, and again, you can either use vocabulary lists that are provided by the material you're using, or you can just tell students, here are 10 things or 15 things that came up in class today. What you can then get students to do is just to write short gap-filled tests. So in the vocabulary builder that you saw me looking at, this word affluent came up. It also appeared in the audio script that you've just seen. And what you could then do is to tell students, okay, just write a short gap-filled test You can use the examples from the course book, from the listening. You can look up examples in a dictionary. You can write your own examples if you're brave and adventurous, but gap the key word. So you might gap something like this. There's a golf course there, which is used by some of the more residents. Affluent. If you want to make it more difficult, you can gap words around the word you're looking at. Maybe you give the first letter. So you might have something like, there are of poverty, but generally it's quite an affluent area. And the first letter here was a P. And again, you might want to go back, look at the audio script, look at the vocabulary list that you had before, and that might help you remember, pockets of poverty. You could also write little matching exercises using the language from the book, using the language from the lesson that you've just studied. So you might have things like undergo, climb and live, match them to the words they go with. So, you know, undergo an economic boom, climb out of poverty, live in relative affluence. And if you wanted to, you could encourage students to do one of these two things as a homework, bring it to class next lesson, use it to test their partners. Okay, so, you know, you're getting the students to kind of not only revise the language that's come up, but also to make revision exercises, which saves you time and effort, and that you can then monitor and check in the classroom. Yeah, so here was an example of the kind of thing that we had in our vocab builder, where it's got a definition. If someone's affluent, they have a lot of money, they're able to live comfortably. If an area's affluent, it's got expensive housing. And you've got these examples like affluent suburb, affluent neighborhood, affluent lifestyle. It developed as an affluent residential area in the 19th century. You've got the noun, yeah, climb out of poverty to greater affluence. The family lived in relative affluence. So again, either they can look this stuff up in a dictionary, or you can provide some of this stuff for them, or you can just give them keywords from a lesson, let them find examples and make these kinds of exercises themselves. You could also get them to do things like this. They could just write little revision questionnaires for their partners in the class. You could begin by getting them to test each other like this. So, you know, it might be things like, so from the last lesson, do you remember? If you have a lot of money and you're able to live comfortably, you're very, and then maybe a student says, yeah, affluent. You can also say that you, a very affluent lifestyle. Could be have, could be lead. Maybe you could also delegate to different students over different weeks the making of things like Quizlet cards, okay? One way that I think is good to make Quizlet cards is to have 3 sentences which all have the same missing word. And the advantage of this is, I think, they show the new words in context, they show the words in action. You're kind of seeing grammar in action, even though it's not really a grammar exercise, but you're getting exposure to the most common grammatical patterns. And on the flip of the Quizlet card, you just write the missing word. So you might have things like this. There's been a in house prices. The city's undergoing an economic The whole area is starting to So it's a word that can be a verb, can be a noun. Okay, you can undergo an economic, area can start to, there's been a in prices. Boom. Okay, you press the Quizlet card, you turn it over, you check your answer. You could also do this in L1, okay? If you're working with very low level learners, and we'll look at how you might do this in a minute, you might also want to use L1 with these students. So let's have a look at how that might work in a few minutes. What you could also do is use your own sound files, okay? Maybe a day or two after class, you just record yourself using your own normal speaking voice and your phone, 10 or 15 chunks from what you studied in the last class. And you can say them twice, say them at normal speed. Maybe you say one of them fast and one of them a bit slower. You send the sound file to your students. they write down what they think they hear, and then they can check by looking back in the course book, or you can just send them your answers. Okay, so it might just be things like undergo an economic boom, undergo an economic boom, a very affluent area, a very affluent area. Okay, and you just send that, and students just try to write that down. Then later you send a transcript of what you'd actually said. In the same way, students could also just write their own sentences using the chunks that you've recorded for them, and they bring them sentences to class and they compare. So it might be something like an affluent area based in the district, a booming industry. Okay, so it might be something like, I don't know, I don't live in a very affluent area. Okay, yeah, speaking as a teacher. Yeah, a lot of the embassies are based in the central district. EdTech is a booming industry these days. And you just write some simple sentences, bring them in, compare them with your partner. I think anything that you're doing like this helps to make the language stick, and it helps to place the language and place the memorization of the language and the performance of this memorization front and center in the language classroom. What's next? Yeah, so other things you can do is you can encourage students to make, or you can make yourself. And this is especially effective if you are a bilingual teacher working with students who share the same first language as you. Okay, I don't know how many of you have been told never use L1 in classes. This actually connects to some of the previous discussion, because I think, you know, if you're a bilingual teacher working with monolingual students who share a first language as you, your bilingualism is your superpower. And it's crazy to deny yourself the opportunity to use that superpower. One way you can do this is just to make bilingual records of new language. So, for example, before they launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, I had been trying to learn Russian. I've since stopped, but this is something that I used to do with my Russian teacher, and I'll just give you a quick taste of how this works. So yeah, she would basically say in English, okay, which is, you know, my first language, her second language, the English versions, and then she would say the Russian versions, and I would listen, try and test my memory. So she would say husband and wife, and I would try and remember and say, muž i žena. Yes. What? Что? Что? Sorry is извини. Okay, and basically I would just sit there for 10-15 minutes every day listening to these sound files and trying to remember things. And you know, as you can tell, I was a kind of A1 level learner at this stage. Извини. Baby boy is something like, oh, malinki balshoya. Malchik, sorry, Malchik. Okay, so the whole point of this is you're using the two languages, you're accepting and recognizing the use of the first language as a gateway to memory and as a way to, you know, make you feel comfortable and not challenge you too much. If you want to make it easier, you can record the second language first, and you just have to remember it in your first language. So, you know, you can hear things like извини, and you go, yeah, sorry. Okay, that's much easier than doing it the other way round. And it also allows you to get a sense of progress. You know, when you're learning, you often feel like I'm not learning anything. But actually, if you have these sound files, say you have 15 words every lesson. Well, after 10 lessons, I've got 150 new bits of language that I didn't know 10 lessons ago. And Of course, there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot more language to learn. But that feeling of satisfaction and that feeling of being able to actually see my own progress and my own learning, making the learning visible, I think is really important and really motivating. And for you as a bilingual teacher, something that's very easy to facilitate. And, you know, as I said here in number 4, students can then just listen to the sound files anytime they want to. Other things you can do is you can go back to the conversations that you asked the students to prepare. Maybe the conversations they thought about what they wanted to say in L1 first, recorded it in L1, looked some things up in L2 using bilingual dictionaries, practiced in class. Maybe you then gave them some feedback on their performance in class. For homework, to kind of consolidate all of this and go over it all again, you can get them to do the conversation again, maybe with a partner, maybe on their own. Okay. And then if you want to, they can share it. They can share it just with you. They can share it with the whole class. So maybe what you do is you send them away after class and you just say, okay, 5 minutes after class, find a partner, have the same conversation again that you had in class, but this time do it even better than you already did. Use some of the feedback that I gave you. Think about some of the new language. Think about how to say what you were trying to say even better and with fewer mistakes this time. Okay, off you go. If you mess it up, record it again and do it until you're happy with it. So that's one of your first homeworks. So again, it's a kind of language focused, repetition based way of tracking your own progress. Because again, what students have is a recorded version of conversations they've had that they can come back to later and listen to. 6 months down the line, they'll listen to that and they'll think, oh, God, I'm much better than that now. I didn't used to be very good, actually. Listen to me there. Oh, I can feel the progress. For you as a teacher, there's no extra work involved in this, unless you want there to be by engaging with their recordings. And I think it's also just recognizing that the way we learn to have conversations invariably requires repetition. My main foreign language is Indonesian because I lived in Indonesia for 3 years. And the way I really learned Indonesian was by having the same conversations over and over and over again. People would ask me the same questions endlessly. You know, where are you from? What are you doing here? How long have you been here? What religion are you? What football team do you support? Do you like Indonesian food? Are you married? Why not? You know, these kind of questions. And I had those questions like 5, 6 times every day. After a couple of months, I was really comfortable with those questions. I could give much longer, more extended answers, and I could ask the people asking me, what about you? And generally, I could understand those answers that came back at me. If I had to have other kinds of conversations, or if I was asked other kinds of questions, useless. I was completely out of my depth. And I think it's important to recognize the central need for repetition. Okay, and trying to make repetition something normal, something predictable. Just like when you're learning to drive, you know, you have to keep practicing parking. When you're learning an instrument, if you play music, you have to keep practicing your chords and practicing your songs. And you have to do that a lot until things become second nature. So anything we can do that I think builds in repetition is also really, really important. Other things you can do, and again, this depends on the material you're using in the classroom. But what we've done with the series I'm involved in, Outcomes, published by National Geographic Learning, is we have one extra video each unit, which has another version of the conversation that students have listened to and practiced having themselves in the classroom. So in this one, they listen and they watch this video and they take notes. What do they learn about the traffic? Uso, You might be able to tell this one's set in Greece, in Thessaloniki, the area by the harbour, the White Tower. So again, the videos are a way of allowing students to re-encounter some of the vocabulary from the lesson, re-encounter some of the vocabulary they've been grappling with themselves from the vocab lists or the vocab builder, and to see someone else do something similar to what you've been asking them to do. They could then do some pronunciation practice with it. They could think about which bits in the listening were hard for them. They could practice trying to say them. They could listen to them again in the recordings themselves. This one's very small, and my apologies for that. But they can also read the transcripts, and they can try and fill in the missing words. So you're giving them a little bit of practice at being able to write down the stream of speech as it comes at them. So this kind of decoding practice, or being able to engage with normal everyday spoken language. And all of these things, again, help students to go over what they've done already and add to that. So there's that constant thing of going backwards in order to then go forwards a little bit. And for me, what we should really be doing when we're thinking about using technology before or after class is thinking about how's the use of technology going to help the students engage with the language we've been looking at? How's the use of technology going to help students personalize and engage with the language that we've been looking at? How's it going to help them remember the language we've been looking at? And how's it going to help them have repeated encounters with the language we've been looking at? I'm going to stop there and throw it over to everyone for some questions. Before we do that, just a few quick things. Please do check out the website I run. It's www.lexicallab.com. There's a lot of extra free resources for teachers and students there. If you're on Instagram, please find and follow. We're lexical_lab there. And if you're one of those shy people that doesn't want to ask questions in public, or if you wake up next Tuesday and you suddenly think, oh, I should have asked him this, feel free to email me. It's hugh@lexicallab.com. I'm always happy to send on copies of the PowerPoints and that kind of thing as well. So yeah, I think what I'll do now is see if anyone has any questions. I guess you put the questions in the Q&A box, is it? Is that how it works?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
The
okay.
questions are in the Q&A. Thank you so much, Mr. Dellar, for your presentation. It's really amazing. I would like to summarize a little bit for a better online. Thank you. For a better online outcome. So you advise everybody to keep it simple, fresh, and to choose what is better for teaching, and to save time for what is more important. This is in a very short sentences, right?
Yeah, in the actual classroom itself. Yeah.
Okay. So I would like to ask if some people they have any questions. Please raise your hand so we can open for you the mics.
Feel free to email if you want the PowerPoint, by the way, or I'll just send it on as well.
Yes. Miss Maali, the mic is yours, please. Miss Maali Muhammad, you can ask your question.
Hey. No?
Miss Maali. I think there is a problem in the mic.
Maybe.
Hannah?
I have a problem in the mic. Okay.
Okay, that's it. Oh, please ask your
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Hello.
Okay.
Hey.
Hello, thanks for your presentation. It was really great, but I would like to ask you some questions about how to improve our own language. Even teachers has to be update all the time. How can we improve our language, our grammar? According to what we are giving or explaining to students nowadays, this is, I think, the old grammar. Okay, now there are many grammar rules that has been changed, and I'm trying to be update all the time in order to keep up with my students.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can we improve? Nowadays, all students want to join the American English schools or the IG for not being maybe restricted with the old grammar. But I think this is a kind of destruction to the language. Okay, I want to improve their English and at the same time to be enjoyable or to have fun during studying.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I think.
Sorry, being for talking too long.
That's okay. I think it's a common problem that you're describing, and to be honest, I think it's a problem that you experience even if you're a native or a non-native, because nobody knows everything. Okay, and for all of us, our knowledge of the language is always provisional and it's always developing. And even as a native speaker living in London, I'm always learning things about the way the language is changing, or about new expressions or new phrases. And I guess we all have a responsibility to try and keep up with the language as best as we can. I think it's also much harder because, say, 30 years ago, English was what the teacher told you English was. Okay, English was what appeared in the course book and maybe what you heard in the occasional movie that you might see in English. Nowadays, it's much harder because students have access to the internet. They can hear every different kind of English from everywhere. They have much more access and exposure. And I think it means recognizing that as a teacher, you can never know everything. In terms of what you do to keep up, I think there's no magic solution to that. I think you have to watch and read a wide variety of different things. You have to watch and read informal stuff, TV dramas, TED Talks, lectures, academic articles, novels, whatever you find you have time for.
I'm sorry for the interruption. I'm trying my best, sending Nile TESOL, for example, EduVasion, and any other course that I can keep up with my students, keep up with the language or the new methods of teaching as possible as I can. Then the other programs, I used Edmodo, I used the Zoom application, also Google Classroom, in order to keep up with them, making PowerPoints, videos, and so on. Yeah, I'm trying my best.
I mean, all you can do is try your best, And I think it's also just good to remember that students don't need perfect teachers, just like children don't need perfect parents. Good enough is good enough. And whoever we are, our students, our experience of teaching those students is only part of their journey through the language. Okay, so we can take them some way down the road, and after that they walk off down the road on their own. And I think all you can do is to help them along the part of the road that you're ready to help them along at the moment. And you can be assured that they'll go on from there after you without you, just like kids do, and don't beat yourself up about it, because we're all in the same boat. in the end, our students will outgrow us, you know.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Thank you, Ms. Maali, so much. Thank you, Mr. Dellar. Thank you, Ms. Maali. We are going to give the chance for other people to ask questions, please. Thank you so much.
I want please only to know if there was a register.
Please write it in the Q&A, and I will answer you as soon as possible.
Okay,
I would like to call Ms. Dr. Thank you so much, Ms. Maali, for your question. Thank you. I would like to call Dr. Atiya Ata for another question. Dr. Atiya, the mic is yours. Dr. Atiya. Dr. Atiya, do you have any questions? Please turn on your mic. Okay, Miss Hannah. Miss Hannah Samir. Miss Hannah Samir, you are raising your hand for a question, right?
Hello?
Dr. Atiya, yes? Yes?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Hello, doctor. Yes, we can hear you very well. The mic is yours.
Good evening. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the grateful presentation. I have a question and the point of view, if you don't mind. You mentioned that it's okay to use L1 while teaching in class. Okay. Do you have any research papers that conducted L1 in conveying L2? Because sometimes we our teachers are not allowed to use L1, and it could be recorded as a negative point against them. I'm a line manager, and when I visit my teachers in class, it's a negative point if they are using L1. And if I allow my students use L1, they are moving back, especially with beginners who are level A, for example. To what extent do you agree about this point?
I completely disagree, I'm afraid. For me, I mean, if I'm an A2 level student, I absolutely want to have a teacher who also speaks my own first language. So if I was learning Arabic, say, a foreign language, the idea of having a teacher who only spoke to me in Arabic and never used English is crazy. This would make the learning journey much harder, much slower. I would struggle, I would panic. I mean, there's no way personally I would look for a teacher who only taught me in the first language from A1 or A2. Absolutely need to have English as a medium. A lot of the time, at the moment, I'm trying to learn Ukrainian, and a lot of what happens with me is I can hear things and understand them, but I can't repeat what I've heard in Ukrainian. So I can listen to a simple video, I can hear people talking. When the teacher asks me, so what did you learn? I can tell them in English, and I can say, so she's a teacher, her husband is a journalist, they have a daughter, okay? And my teacher will say, now say it in Ukrainian. It's like, well, I can't remember how to say it. I understood it when I heard it, but I can't remember how to say it in the second language. And what she'll then do is to repeat it, and I'll, yeah, that was it. I knew that. And it's an absolutely crucial bridge between the two languages. I think the important thing is to think about why are you using L1 and to be principled about the way you're using it and to have clear guidelines about why you're using it. I also think for memory, it's really, really important. And even at higher levels, I mean, if you have a student, say, who's like first certificate level, a lot of the time, students can understand English, they can translate the English back into their first language. When they try to speak in English, they often just reproduce word for word. Oh, 1 minute, there's someone at the door. 1 second, I'm sorry, 1 sec. 1 sec. mister. Sorry. So just one final thing about L1. Even with higher level students, it can be a good way to catch fossilized errors, okay? So imagine you're a French speaker and you hear something like, I haven't seen you for ages. It's easy to understand. You can think of how to say it in French. If you have two-way translation where you have the English and then the French, a really good test of how good you actually are is translate it into French. Later, cover the English, look at the French, your mother tongue, see if you can remember how to say it in English. What the weak students will do is what they do anyway, which is translate word for word. So they will say something like, it is a long time since I didn't see you, okay? Which is more or less how you say it in French. What you then do is to go, you're translating it word for word from your first language. In English, I haven't seen you for ages. So that kind of two-way translation can be a really good way of catching those kind of fossilized inbuilt errors, I think. And for me, I think the reason that you're told not to use first language is because it's a way of promoting monolingualism. It's a way of promoting native speakerism. It's a way of depriving bilingual teachers of this great power and great skill that you actually have.
No,
so
this is not that point, but what we really face in classes, or many teachers face in classes, is students prefer to use L1 and they do not improve to the extent we look for. Anyway,
I mean,
thank you
as a
for
low
this
level
point.
learner, I prefer to use English because I don't have enough of the foreign language to feel comfortable. So I sympathize with those students, you know.
Okay, the second point you mentioned that children do not need good parents and students do not need
perfect
good teachers.
Good
Yes.
enough.
Okay, is there a criterion that they are perfect or not?
No,
for
obviously,
teachers.
But perfect is in the eye of the beholder. But I think a lot of teachers beat themselves up and kind of feel bad about their own experiences or their own qualities because they don't think they're perfect. And I think imagining that you're going to achieve a state of perfection is not helpful. Okay. Do you know what I mean? I think, of course, you want to think about how you can get better than you already are, in the same way as you want your students to get better than they already are. But at the same time, I think you have to recognize that you will not reach a stage where you can do everything. Your students won't reach a stage where you can do everything. None of us will reach a stage where we know everything. None of us will reach a stage where we never make mistakes or we're never frustrated with what we do in the classroom. So I think it's just recognizing that, okay, I may have made a little mistake there. I'm not perfect. It was good enough, you know?
Okay.
And just sometimes being a bit kinder to yourself as a teacher.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you. I think I have time for one more and then I have to disappear off.
Okay, we have Miss Hannah. Do you have any question, Miss Hannah? Miss Hannah, are you there? I think Miss Hannah cannot hear me or she's not here.
Yeah, Miss Ines also, if she would like to ask.
Yes.
Hello? Are you there?
Yes. Hannah. Okay, hello. Yes, yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution to today's lecture. First of all, I'd like to learn, based on your wide expertise in teaching language, how can I get students' attention during class, especially in the B1 level?
So I think when I think about the teachers that most impacted me from school, I think the reason they impacted me most was because they treated me as a human being and they didn't kind of say to me, here's the subject, you're here, you have to come here, it's your problem, get yourself here. What they basically did was they recognized where I was, and they worked out how to bring the language or the subject to me and to build up from there. And I think the way that you work with any student at any level really is by talking to them, finding out about them, sharing stories with them, listening to them, giving them a chance to share their own stories and experiences, sharing your stories and experiences, and through that process, building up the language and adding to the language. And I think a lot of it is to do with making sure that in the classroom, you have this kind of human element and human contact where we're not just studying the language as some kind of abstract algebra-like mathematical kind of bunch of formulas and exercises that have to be done, but we're using the language as a real medium of communication. And I think sometimes in the language classroom, it's easy to forget that what language is actually really for is communicating with people. And what communication is about learning from each other and about each other and sharing our knowledge and understanding of the world and building on that together. So I think it's trying to put that kind of human element back into the classroom a bit more, which can sometimes run counter to the material that we're given to use or the way in which we're encouraged to teach. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 second. My phone's ringing. Hey, I'm going to have to disappear off because my son's just come home and I've got another meeting in about 2 minutes, I'm afraid. So,
thank you so much, really,
feel free to
for
email.
Yes, please. And if you have any other questions, please put it in the Q&A and we'll send it to Mr. Dellar. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Shukran.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I can
Take
see
care,
Miss. Thank you so much. Have a nice time. I can see Miss